Alfred. Yeah, I mean, I do feel a huge responsibility coming in to this family line to take it, to the next level. We have to figure that during that particular time in history, during his administration, it was very difficult to really understand the larger picture that we're now getting more clarity on in regards to the nature of these treaties. I mean, as we know, or at least a lot of people know, if they've done research on this subject, that Eisenhower had contact with at least, 3 different occasions with numerous different races, ending in the presence of Valiant 4. And they put him on VIP status in the Pentagon for 3 years in order to assist him in helping the human race to become sovereign, which was always the intention. I mean, that's why he fought the war and tried to stop the Nazis. But, we're dealing with these 3-letter organizations that were put into place by Truman, with him unknowingly being aware of what Project Paperclip was all about and what that was, going to begin. Gosh, sorry if I'm not that articulate. Today's been just so much going on with just all this sort of information. But basically, Project Paperclip was put into place, which started this massive infiltration, including this flyover of UFOs over the Capitol, which was in 1952, 2 years before the actual treaty got signed. The Sons of Belial, and we have the Black Suns. The Black Suns are primarily Draco-Reptilian, and the Sons of Belial are the factions of the Anunnaki that are fallen, and they ended up creating a federation together to pretty much share in the spoils of war, so that they weren't competing agendas anymore, but they would become, aligned to make sure that there was no real room for us to claim victory. And this particular federation is still kind of in the works, but they haven't been able to use enough of our energy. They have not been able to harvest enough of our energies to be successful in completely kind of taking over the Earth grids, which is basically what they mainly target because it has a direct link to our DNA. When we look at the Emerald Covenant, the Emerald Order is connected to the Orphan consciousness, the Indigo races, and the Crystal Children, and they're part of the Grail lines and the Angelic lines that came to Earth to raise the frequency. And they made agreements with the Niburian Pleiadians and the Nephilim and the Anu Elohim councils, basically the Pleiadian Star League, to stop them from intentionally hijacking all of humanity into the Anunnaki evolution. And so the Elohai, which is the highest level of the Elohim, have been, trying to do this. And I would say that they represent the Emerald Order. And the whole idea is that these fallen races would be sort of called out, knowing that there's a detriment to even their ability to progress in their agendas, and that the best thing that they could do was create a treaty. And that treaty is called the Emerald Covenant. And it relates to helping us as a humanity reach our 12-strand DNA potential. And it's to help us to get the energy of the grids back in the hands of the power of Gaia. And in this window period that we're in, this is when the hosting of the Melchizedek lines, which have basically fallen into patriarchy, have moved into the hosting of the goddess energy, aligned with what's called crystal star hosting and the Aurora, which are from Andromeda galaxy, which is all about weaving it back together during this time, which is all already happening on a cosmic level. So because we've gotten this far and we've stayed sort of ahead of the game, staying informed, that's been enough to keep this total enslavement from taking place. And so new treaties had to come in, which were basically a surrender from some of the darker races. And that is the Emerald Covenant Treaty. And that almost helps to nullify things like the Greada Treaty. But I am in absolute agreement that it needs to be symbolized with a statement from Trump and an acknowledgement from our governments that we are no longer making any deals. Now, again, in Eisenhower administration, it was considered a surrender. These treaties actually originated with Churchill, Winston Churchill, Aleister Crowley, and Hitler. And this goes way into like Atlantean times and agreements that Aleister Crowley made to be sort of the front runner of, pushing these agendas and creating that black magic and the whole idea of what it would take to become an immortal being that basically siphon Kundalini and give the power to these individuals that don't know how to get power any other way. So I don't want to, talk too much until, I'm sure you want to jump in with some questions, and I know that some of this can go over people's heads, so I'll just sort of stop there. Absolutely, I'll do anything it takes. If you'll give me the time of day, I would definitely have a lot to share. And I feel it's incredibly important. He needs all this information. All this has been kept hidden from us. That's why people have such a hard time with it. But we have to recognize that we're multidimensional beings, and we're really dealing with, it really does come down to service to self, service to others. And we can get lost in all the names, all these different kind of hybrid groups. Some who actually feel abandoned and are just really angry at the overlords or the ring leaders of these agendas, because they haven't been really assisted. They've been sort of left to figure it out for themselves, and sort of seen as a lesser entity because they've been hybridized, because there's so much concern about racial purity. But then other ones they're using specifically because they hold the genetics of the reptilian, and through trauma-based mind control, they can work with those genetics within that person, which cancels out the other high level DNA expression that they have, which is called Orifim, which connects to the founder races. And so when we look at the Emerald Covenant, it actually connects to the guardian races, and those that are born with this activated are doing this work right now on the planet, and they've been tasked with doing this work. And this is what you and me do, and this is what so many others are doing. Even if we don't have the full picture, we're doing it. We get bits and pieces along the way, but it's through the individuals that are able to handle this and bring it forward that are creating, these activations that are directly impacting the earth grids. What it basically does is it neutralizes the ability of these dark technologies to work, because if they have nothing to siphon, or they don't have enough harvested energy to work with, then there's not a whole lot they can do. And I really do feel they expected us to be way more enslaved by now. This is, all these allegations coming out in 2017, they thought New World Order would have really been established around the time of 2012, which was when the Mars recruitment wanted to make sure I was off planet by that date. So, we all share in this inheritance, and at the same time, the whole of humanity has access to it. So it's not about hierarchy. It's just about allowing the activations to happen, because every single person has that blueprint. And the tree of life was pulled down to a 10-strand spherical model, sacred geometry model, which is draconian DNA, 10-strand. And then the negative factions of the Anunnaki have limited themselves to 11-strand to keep us from that 12-strand activation that brings us into the 13th gate, which is basically what this planetary body was formed from, or the intention of it reaching fruition as an ascension planet. So once we get the 12, we're able to complete. Even if we don't embody it on a physical level, as long as we have it in our consciousness, that process has already begun. And so the 11th gate, Stargate, has been infiltrated with dark alien machinery, and so has the 10th gate, which both represent the DNA strands. And that's to keep us from achieving the 12th strand. That's why they reversed all the sacred geometries and changed the numbering and scrambled the DNA coding, and started to push them through programmings in our society. And then with the ET treaties, they've been given access to abductions, but those things were already out of control long before Eisenhower ever stepped into office. And it's just something that hasn't really been able to be fully remedied until this window period, which is 2000 to 2017. And that's why in the last couple months of 2017, everything is coming to light in such a huge way, because we've really been successful. They'd have my support. My mom discovered that a lot of people were questioning whether or not I was related to Eisenhower, because not every site on the internet has us in the family tree. There's sisters missing, cousins missing. And so if you Google her name, Susan Eisenhower, you can see directly to the right that she has all her daughters listed, and wanted to make sure that people know that I am who I say I am. So there, I was like, wow, okay. She must be supportive of this, because this was just a year or two ago. I was really surprised. I have brought this up to family. It tends to be a conversation that gets easily changed. I think there's a lot of anxiety that comes along with it, particularly because during his era, we got folks like William Cooper, being murdered, all sorts of threats, and the laws that were established were really hefty if any of this was to be exposed. Now there's so many of us that it's no longer an issue, but I think there is sort of this lingering sort of energy, or the remnants of what it was like back then, still held in their consciousness, which makes them maybe not as ready to step forward with this sort of stuff. And I think they're trying to figure it out too, because as we know, there's a ton of disinformation. But so much is hiding in plain sight. So much is obvious. A lot of these criminal activities are coming to light. Negative agendas and treaties, haven't even been about the Greys trying to rescue their dying race, which needed our genetics in order to create this hybrid and breeding program, which I can't say I agree with or don't agree with. It is what it is. But when we are looking at, the actual reptilian agenda, how that connects with these different projects and programs, there's so much compartmentalization that it's really hard to convince anybody except for what the victims and witnesses have to say and what, research have had to say. I do know that I always have their support, but I have a feeling that I'm not going to have a lot of company if I go to the Oval Office. But that could change. I definitely am vocal, and I've been working on this for a long time. I've never been ostracized by them. I've felt the support and love in my family grow, and I think they're grateful that I'm tackling this issue because nobody else in the family is talking about this kind of stuff, and I didn't come in for anything less than the truth. So into this incarnation.
Right.
Really what it comes down to, and this is the target window period. So as far as how I look at it now, it's been, really hard to come to terms with that kind of answer. So probably now, because of what we're seeing in the news and, basically the latest reports that I've heard as far as the health of the planetary body and its ability to move into these higher earth energies, the hijacking attempt of the 5D ascension, which relates to our throat chakra and alchemy and the fifth element, which is the ether, which the 13th gate represents as it rules the ether, and it shifts all the grids into being able to sort of run the current of the healing of the dragon lines, which relates to our kundalini. So ever since the sun started to move into Ophiuchus in 2010, we are starting to get those activations. But then we noticed that the assaults were increasing, or things that we're seeing even now as far as geoengineering and superstorms and energy weapons that create fires and all the false flags that are still going on. I mean, that's really the final attempts, but we have to understand that we're a replica of the earth grids and the elements and this whole process of alchemy, and it's going on within our own beings. So as long as the earth grids aren't infected to the degree that they used to be, the whole of the human race is going to be a part of it. Whereas before, it felt like, and it still could be the case, but I'm kind of on the cusp of having I wouldn't say a fixed opinion about it, but a more certain opinion that instead of this massive bifurcation, things are happening like right here and right now. Now, if there was a bifurcation, which some souls will experience, because not everybody's going to be ready for this new earth energy, they're going to be siphoned off on artificial timelines into what's called a phantom earth that relates to all the energy that's been collected by the Nephilim reversal grid, which is in the Stonehenge area of Britain. And it's also where the other alien machinery exists, something called the NDC, which is the Nibiru Diotic Crystal, and also the net, which has created a quarantine. So if human consciousness hasn't completely been duped, then the whole of humanity stands a chance. They just might not understand what's going on, and their ascension symptoms are going to be much more extreme because there still will be a resistance to a lot of this information, and it'll create a crisis that is probably going to manifest pretty soon to help them become aligned with what their higher self or soul would want, because I don't think anybody really wants to digress and become a lesser version of themselves disconnected from soul, which creates this necessity for abduction and correction. But we're not dealing with real time and space when we're dealing with multi-dimensions and different timelines and how we sort of incarnate along the wheel. So it might, not be the same experience for everybody, but I would say on much more of a collective level, I would give a number like the one my intuition is telling me is more like 70% of people are on board. It doesn't mean they're there yet as far as being on the radar of being fully conscious, but the seeds have been planted and they're moving closer and closer to the activations that are necessary, which would take us as a whole planet as we know it into those higher earth energies versus maybe something removing us from reality as we know it, kind of waking up somewhere else, experiencing more of the kind of Mandela effect or whatever with all the different things that just don't necessarily line up coming out of the woodworks. We would have a lot more unconsciousness. Right now we have a lot of defensiveness and a lot of anger and reaction, which is a part of the purging. But if none of that stuff was coming out into the open, those belief systems would be incredibly fixed with those people. Now they're just reacting and angry and in disbelief. And that is a part of the growth period that they're being thrown into. And it can only really lead a person to truth, because once you manifest a crisis, the only thing that's really going to set you free is the truth. Whereas if there's no crisis and it remains dormant and you're just stuck in a belief system that you're never going to see something bring it to light or expose it on a grander scale, those souls do run risks of falling for the transhuman agenda, falling for this so-called utopian future that only benefits some but not all. But as long as you're one of the people that benefit, why do you need to care about anybody else? And that's the problem in our society. If it doesn't hit your home, if it doesn't hit your family, if it's not a friend of yours that has been victimized or dealing with this kind of stuff, then people are really out for their own survival. They don't look in a unity consciousness sort of way. And enough people do, I would say at this point, and enough is being exposed to start to rattle a person's consciousness into opening up to what really exists within, which is our connection to this earth in a profound way, our connection to the elements. There's no assault or weapon that we can't handle. But if we give our power away and we are trusting of the propaganda in the programming, that's the real bait. We can handle chemtrails and all sorts of weaponry when we exist in a higher level of thinking. And it doesn't mean that we have to understand the nitty gritty that you and I like to get into either. You just have to be receptive enough to the frequency of love and wisdom to be able to create that shift. And I would say it's rippling out, and people are getting activated right and left, and I can feel it. I can feel it in my body big time. I'm just like, this is major. My boys have had an open mind to the sort of stuff that I do a lot sooner than I guess I expected. I've never pushed it on them, but they've been to an event with me. They saw other speakers. They started to do their own research. And around the age of 13 or 14, they started to photocopy flyers about chemtrails and geoengineering. I took them to visit Dane Wigington at his home. And, of course, they were really in awe of his knowledge. And I think they took me a lot more seriously when they started to meet my colleagues and friends like yourself in Hawaii, when they were just really blown away by you and Andy and the time that they spent there. And I think, that's just the nature of kids. If they're getting it directly from their mother, part of the growth, I think, between mother and child or children, has to do with some skepticism to sort of push out a little bit more of the how persevering you are and how much you kind of know what's at stake. So some of their questions and concerns have brought out a stronger truth in me to help them to really see, this isn't just speculation. This isn't just internet searching. This isn't just, here's the latest conspiracy. They went through the Mars recruitment with me. They were, 8 years old, 7 years old. They saw everything that happened. We had to move house. I had to get us out of there and move, back home. And they saw all the drama. They saw all the craziness. It was a lot for them to process at that age, and I wanted to shield them as much as possible from it. But I have to say they're two very conscious kids that, really are able to see through things, but it also makes it really challenging for them to do anything 3D, like finish school. Or, they're really looking for their passion. They want to do something that has real meaning and not just go through the motions of what the school systems expect. And I can't exactly get upset with them for it because I fully understand. So it's a challenge, I think, this generation of knowing how to, apply yourself. But I have trust and faith they're gonna easily find their way and find their niche, and they just have all the unconditional love in the world from me and understanding. But at the same time, I have to make sure they don't slack too much. It's just a lot to process. Our generation, or I know we have a little bit of an age difference, but back in our time, we were suspicious. We knew something was going on. Now it's everywhere. We didn't have access to internet and Google like we do now. It was a lot more difficult to educate oneself on these matters unless you pulled yourself away and really sought it out, as you know. So I'm glad I was able to expose them and not overwhelm them too much. And I'm just letting them move with it in a timing that kind of works for them, in the hopes that it doesn't completely shut them down or cause extreme, where they're putting themselves in any kind of danger, I guess. So I'm doing my best. But yeah, no, we're a strong unit.
Right.
I've been reading some incredible channelings through Kirk Mollison. If anybody wants to Google that name, it's Kirk Mollison. And he even brings up me in the channeling and the kind of work that, folks like us are doing. And it really touched me. I'm very wary about channelers, but, the whole thing had me in goosebumps, and I had a lump in my throat. I'm like, my BS meter is pretty strong. So he's very close with us. I mean, he's still working with us. He's connected to the Brotherhood of Light and Valiant Thor and all these, benevolent groups that he was aligned with, in this physical incarnation, but so much got sabotaged. Because the thing is, we're dealing with such deep-seated shadow government that is thousands of years old. It's not just, we signed a treaty and that was Eisenhower who did it. We're talking like this goes way back. These treaties are renewed every 10 years, and they took place before Eisenhower went into office. And why would he want to create an agreement with the very beings that had to do with the war he tried to win? The Nazis he tried to fight, the groups the ET groups that were aligned with the Nazis. And so the thing is, when we look at the dying race that they presented themselves as, where they needed our genetics in order to heal themselves, and they broke those treaties, we have to see that not every hybrid is going to be this way, but what is that hybridization all about? Are we really helping a race to heal, or are they, being prepared to come out and almost take over and put us in sort of an alien government scenario based on a certain part of their genetics and that hybridization? Because I do believe the reptilians are a part of the treaty, but so are the Greys. Some of the Greys, though, have been trying to break free from the reptilians. So there are groups that are positive that are stepping away from it all, and others that are being used. So we're dealing with, again, a very mixed bag, but the overall agenda, and the one that is most obvious, is the one that you're, talking about, life force of children to give them the power and the immortality and the fame and the money. And it's become so out of control that's the food they rely on, because if they were to directly connect to source, imagine what they would have to go through on a karmic level of just clearing, all of this. I mean, and not only is that something to be concerned about, they really don't care. They compromise their DNA on purpose. And the Anunnaki basically commissioned them to be the demons that would, or the dark forces that would create so much intimidation to the point where the Dracos ended up taking over with the Anunnaki in agreement, because it's like, well, as long as you have control of the human race and use them as a food source, we'll be right there. They supplied the technology at that gateway at Stonehenge to bring all that to Nibiru, to then divvy out to all the negative races, which are service to self, which is how they stay alive. That's their life cycle. And so these technologies, again, they're not working as well as they could be because of what is happening in humanity, this mass awakening. Because the thing is, once we awaken, we start to call our power back. We're not powering up these technologies anymore. And those overlays of these negative energies on the grids that have names like Phoenix Grid, the White Lion Grid became the White Eagle Grid. There's a Draco Grid, a Dragon Grid, and all these overlays are starting to lift. And so, nobody would have known what you were talking about when you were being, pulled into those circles. I mean, my mother's been pulled into those circles. Ike was pulled into those circles. He actually has something in the Gettysburg Farm not to be open until 2050 that basically is the ultimate disclosure about everything he witnessed. But he wanted to wait, I think, till a lot of the people in our family or that a whole generation would go by, because we're so attacked and threatened by it. But the thing is, we've been able to handle it, and a lot of truth has come through. And all the different people that have come to me saying that they've made contact with Eisenhower, they say just because he's passed on doesn't mean he doesn't have emotion. I mean, he can't separate himself fully and completely. He's not off in the light like, see you guys later. He is absolutely and totally, working with us. And even people that didn't know I was related to Eisenhower, when I entered the Psychic Institute, they said Eisenhower's here. And I wasn't even carrying the name. And they were like, you guys have been working together for a long time, and he's right there. He's right there. And he, of course, I'm sure has regrets. He wished he could have done things differently, but we got to cut him some slack. I mean, even a lot of the benevolent groups and higher beings, I don't say higher as in better, but more activated, knew that they couldn't do anything until the stellar activation cycle. So that wasn't the era that we could have claimed victory anyway. I mean, what if he had sided with the Nordics? What if the negative Nordics came in and sabotaged it? I mean, the thing is, we're dealing with a full-on war that has so many hooks and so many traps and so many pits that we have to understand that this is the time. Regardless of what happened then, there's enough knowledge now and enough who are mission-orientated to take it where we've taken it. And so many people receptive and supportive are absolutely just as much a part of it. I mean, that's what it takes. And that's what ripples out. So, but yeah, people should definitely check out that channeling. I've shared some excerpts. And it talks about light workers. It talks about unity consciousness. It talks about the theft from us, and how so many of us want to speak, but we get shut down at a young age, and basically sometimes our insecurities or our fear of what others think keeps us silent. But look at, I mean, there are huge numbers of us now. Nobody's alone in this anymore. We have each other to support, and we can block and delete everybody else that is aggressive and you know, but nobody ever has a problem with people disagreeing or there being differences of opinion, but abusiveness is not okay. And that is a part of that program, this constant warring if we have differences of opinion. And a good example for us as, you know, people in this position of speaking out publicly, you know, is to accept our differences with love and respect. The waking up process is going to be really difficult for people, but being abusive is not okay, especially if we're seeking justice over something as and I don't necessarily have to block forever, but you know, let's get to the bottom of it. Nobody's pushing anything down anybody's throat, but we have to look at everything.
Yeah.
I want to help with that and spread that around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all I can say is that, I mean, it's all insanity to me. I can't even imagine being one of the mothers that had that happen. I just, it's so mind blowing. And, I mean, this is what we got to do. We got to do everything it takes to get the information out there, to get the information spread, because, you know, people need to know all of this. My mom had this feeling, I don't know why, to have me at home. And back then nobody was really having kids at home. I think she felt this need to protect me because I don't know what would have happened, because I was pre-targeted before birth. And that's about all I know. But she had this instinct to make sure she had me at home. And I mean, they do all sorts of things. They'll take your kids away. I mean, I remember after I gave birth to my kids, and they were considered high risk because they were twins, even though they were full term and they were both, they weighed a lot. I mean, they were both 6.5 pounds. I couldn't get a midwife to help me have them at home, but I wanted to have them at home. And I remember just shuffling my cards and doing all I could, because instinctually I knew that having my kids in the hospital was not safe. We got to fight for these people's rights. I mean, everybody's got to stand up, because the thing is, the shift is happening through the human race. It's not happening through anybody else, because every power structure has been infiltrated. And the sickness behind this disregard for biological life is the transhumanism agenda, because transhumanism destroys all biological life eventually. And there's nowhere in any star system or galaxy that it's ever been successful. And as much as, well, this is what I heard from, you know, different whistleblowers, that they give people a chance to step away from it, telling them the ramifications of what transhumanism will do. But they don't care, because they're in the life cycle of this harvesting, and you can't get any lower than, I mean, you can't get any lower than any level of it. It's all really low. So as you know, my perseverance in these sort of things, that, you know, I join with you, and I'll do anything that it takes to put these treaties to an end. And the thing is, you know, understanding the roots of them really helped, because, you know, the only reason I mentioned the Eisenhower thing was definitely not directed at you or anything that you said. It's just the amount of emails that I get shutting me down because, oh, this is, you know, look at what your great grandfather did. What a legacy. And it's like, you have no idea. There's a much bigger picture here. And, you know, if anybody wants to contact me directly for me to give them the information about where these originated, and the infiltration that already took place before he stepped into government, and the fact that these breeding programs and this sort of thing has actually been happening since Atlantean times. They used to carry these advanced individuals off to Nibiru to breed with, took away all their rights as women. So, you know, we keep seeing the war changing and morphing into new forms of expression for the basic vampirism of the human soul and sexual life force and in connection to spirit. And so, you know, and how that relates to the grids and this dumbing down of our DNA is, you know, the infection of these earth grids to keep us from being able to synthesize the masculine and feminine within our DNA. And the thing is, once we recognize what's been targeted, which is our own internal balance and unity consciousness, and we begin to push the envelope in really preserving the sacredness of those relationships and ourselves, and we really walk a path of integrity, they absolutely don't have anything on us. And nobody should be resistant to this. There's no instant gratification that is higher or better than devoting yourself to this and the long-term rewards that come along with choosing to be in alignment, because we're on timelines right now where we can be in our avatar consciousness, where we have more powers and abilities than we can imagine. But the whole deal is people are so infected or obsessed with the ego gratifications that feed them on an instant level that they don't even care about that. And so that reptilian part of our brain is what they're targeting. And that's just such a small part of the rest of all that we are. And it's an addiction matrix too. So we just, really have to be strong in ourselves, because the more we rise up, all these imbalances will naturally iron themselves out, and more of this stuff is going to come to the light. And this is why where we are right now is, I have a good feeling about where we're heading, because a balance is returning. And in this process of sharing information and becoming more of a unified group of individuals, recognizing that we're in alignment with the ability to really integrate this and get those downloads and have those epiphanies. This is all purging. It's a mass exorcism. And I'm sure I remember saying this in an interview with you before, that it's like a mass exorcism is underway. And even these trolls that come on these threads, it's like, I call it a pea soup moment. Oh, they're just having a pea soup. They're just emoting their demonic ways. I don't know. They're very threatened. And the thing is, it's like, the reassurance is there's unconditional love from source. For us humans, it might take a while to forgive, but we have a direct connection with that unconditional love. And anybody can turn it around. And it's time to stop. It's like, because the thing is, these negative technologies are going to expire. Transhumanism is getting busted. People, aren't buying into those timelines, which is weakening them. And if they can get so weak to a point where they become space dust and they don't exist at all. So I hope for their sake, even though I personally I'm not advocating for them in the slightest, this is the best way to go. And we're going to see some huge shifts and some major divine justice take place in the next year or so. And it's already begun.
Oh.
And I sort of get redundant in saying this, but to me, the war is one within ourselves. We're in every moment dealing with different energies. The speed of the electromagnetic spectrum is picking up as far as our ability to integrate more of a multidimensional awareness and bring ourselves back into balance. And so everything about the media, everything that we see in the news, things that are coming out of Hollywood, I can't say in every power structure it's all negative. There is some positive, but pretty much you got to figure that everybody's been exposed to it and they're just kind of afraid to speak out, or they've heard something, because that's sort of where it's at. It's right under their nose. So basically we have a choice in every moment to walk in union with our soul, to be strong in who we are on a soul level. And it's this other stuff that makes us susceptible, because the minute we give our power away, the minute we allow our belief systems to be infected by any sort of meme or propaganda or distortion of the masculine and feminine, or something we notice our physical bodies is having an issue with, without actually listening to the message of our physical bodies, or looking at the dynamic in our relationships and really taking the time to listen or work it out or find harmony, then we are enabling, and we tend to, as humans, create resistance to the priorities. Being too sensitive, or I don't really have time for that. I got to go make money, and everything's about what we've been encouraged since we were young to try and achieve, which is status and money and wealth. And most of us know that's BS, and we don't fall for that and recognize what the priority is. But as powerful as those technologies are, nothing is more powerful than spirit. Nothing is more powerful than our soul, if it's aligned with spirit. And that's where we're able to create alchemy. So no matter what hits us, we can transmute it pretty darn quick. We build shields of light. We're able to neutralize implants, even ethereal implants. Most of the human race was implanted at the base of their skull to keep us from moving into galactic chakras that were going to activate our DNA, which is available to us now. And that exists between the 8th and 9th chakra, and it forms an infinity spiral around the head. And once we reach those chakras, we begin to experience an upgrade in our physical vessel, which helps us to experience an immortality that isn't the same as like what a vampire would experience. It has to do with a spiritual initiation. And the best way to embrace a spiritual initiation is to look at the challenges and the adversities in your life and listen to yourself, listen to your inner voice, listen to the earth, listen to the stuff that wants to come in and naturally heal it. Because as our bodies get injured and there's a natural healing response, if our life feels injured, there's a natural healing response that comes in the form of synchronicities or new people that are more on the same wavelength as us. It's our willingness to let go of the old and not be attached to it so we can embrace the new, because on a biological level, we carry the codes of ascension, and so does the planet. And artificial intelligence, from a higher dimensional perspective, is pretty weak. compared to the fullness of what we can embody. But the mindset, the mind control, the programming, and the limitations of being in a 3D programming, because this isn't a 3D planet, it's a 3D programming, has made us very susceptible. And so it's very easy to shuffle souls into that loss of connection, because everything's about the external and what's going to happen next and what's going on in the news. And every time we're about to take a huge leap, there's another false flag to sink our energy, and it spreads like a virus. And so that panic and fear, as much as we have to go through the process of mourning and shock and reaction, we have to allow it to help us to grow and expand and embody, the antidote. And when we look at weather weapons, that's a clear sign of the AI, how it impacts the earth, where the earth itself is so incredibly vulnerable. But she's a multidimensional body. And as far as I'm concerned, she's saying, this is where you guys are still allowing yourselves to be controlled. And I'll show you through what it's doing to my elements, because it's actually doing it to yours. And it's sort of like there's this voice in there that says, come with me. There's dimensions where we're free of this. But until you initiate yourself into those higher earth energies, this is what you're going to get. You're going to see the weaponization of nature, the elements, storms, earth, all sorts of things. And then the weaponization of us, more false flags, more people being mind controlled to do these mass shootings, where they might get some signal through their phone or something through an implant that tells them and instructs them to do something. But if you're strong in your soul and in your spirit, there's no amount of influence or mind control that is going to do anything. It's going to do what it's been doing to people like us. It's going to give us voices. It's going to help us to call it out, because you can feel the contrast. I mean, I can feel it instantly, and I can work with it and get rid of it, versus if I either thought it was positive or that, the governments and the propaganda coming out of Hollywood was actually beneficial. So I try and shield myself from as much of it as possible, not because I'm not strong enough, because it makes me sick, if anything. But there is, of course, a lot within those organizations that are trying to create change. And that's really, really important. So we can't fully abandon anything. But I mean, as far as the black goo goes, there's organic black goo. And again, everything is an imitation. And when it becomes an imitation, because it's not connected to anything, it could become a weapon. Whereas biological life that's connected with spirit has natural integrity, natural compassion, natural desire for unity consciousness. And it's going along a flow, and also upgrades that help us to stand in a higher frequency of that, which is organic, which is taking place right now, especially as the sun's moved into the 13th sign. But that's also something that people aren't going to naturally attach themselves to, because does any of that information come through the media? All the Essenes and the true Templars got wiped out. All the knowledge of soul alchemy and all the freedom teachings got wiped out. The Emerald Tablets connected to Thoth got perverted and basically rewritten. And all the texts, the ancient texts, have been distorted, by that Anunnaki manipulation that, now work with the Dracos. So people just have to be really strong in themselves. Look at this as a reunion with the true you, and start to divorce yourself. I mean, this is a love story. Our DNA holds everything about Hyros, Gamos, and sacred union. Our initiations have to do with being in that authentic relationship with ourselves, with each other, and with nature. Everything else is an imposter. And I mean, I like to just put it down to the simplicity of all. That's something we have ultimate permission to divorce. It's not in alignment with nature. It doesn't flow with nature. It goes against everything in our physical expression. And that's why we begin to become more like robots, because our biological life cannot sustain that frequency. So the artificial component starts to come into place. And only those that are really lost or really disconnected or unconscious are going to fall prey to that. And that's why it's very important to bring people back to center and to understand that there's cycles in nature that are stepping us up and helping us to initiate. It's not all on us. It's simply about just being in your breath, sitting by a tree, embracing, the Divine Mother and the Christ consciousness, and not necessarily putting them as figures, because then people are reminded of religion and belief systems. But look at it as a natural energetic that exists in your own divine blueprint. And it's obvious it exists in Earth, because everything, look at the web of life and how it functions and the grander intelligence of it all. And on a multidimensional level, it's just like how the human being was created. We've got the benevolent, which is like the immune system, and then we've got the disease, which is like the Dracos and these negative agendas. And what they prey on is the negative ego. So if a person is willing to clear their negative ego and to be humble and a bit more transparent, being okay with the fact that we're all wounded and we all have something that we need to work on, and we don't have to hide behind any facades, all that stuff is going to be a thing of the past. but the programmings are so deeply embedded. They're multi-generational. The DNA damage has been carried thousands of years from generation to generation, but consciousness is going to turn on the DNA. It's going to open our galactic chakras. We don't have to dismantle the technologies. We need to neutralize them and deactivate them. And so the war is won within, you know, and the more each person claims victory in their own right, that'll start to ripple out and help people match that frequency and vibration. And I would say that we're pretty much almost on the other side of that tipping point.